What's the worst thing a person has said to you on a date? Story 1. He said, "So aren't you going to invite me to your place? I bought you lunch. You kind of owe me." Coming from a guy I met once and had breath so bad I'm surprised it didn't melt the fork. This happened to me, except he was already at my place, shoes off, chilling on the couch watching a movie. He actually said, "So I've paid for dinner twice. When am I going to get something out of it?" I calmly got up, picked up his shoes, opened the front door, and chucked them out into the courtyard as far as I could, and said, "Get out," while he stared at me in disbelief. Also, not that it matters, but I offered to pay my own bill both times. I mean, if he wanted some transactional action, there are people who specialize in that. I think his problem is that they usually charge more than the price of 2 dinners. Story 2. She said wistfully, after 2 wines, "God, you are so amazing. Such a shame that you look like that." I just laughed, paid the tab, wished her a lovely night, and headed home. I don't think she was being mean, just saying what she felt without a filter. She called me the next day to apologize and said she really liked getting to know me, then asked if I would be up for hanging out just on a friendly basis. Despite her brain fart, she actually seemed like a really nice, caring person, and she came across as genuinely sorry for not just her words, but the fact that she actually thought that. So knowing she was just a bit shallow, I said, "Sure, I can always use more friends, right? Nobody's perfect." We hung out again a few weeks later. While talking, she seemed like she might actually be into me, touching my arm and flirting a bit. So I mentioned that while I thought she was nice and very pretty, she was a bit too shallow for me to be really interested romantically. She looked really sad and said she knew she was shallow, hated it, and was trying really hard to work on it. I felt bad for her, but I also wasn't keen on always wondering whether or not my partner thinks I'm ugly. So anyways, we got to know each other properly over a few months, became great friends over a couple of years, and we both ended up in relationships with other people. She moved abroad later to be with her family and had a really messy breakup with her guy who moved in with her. He cheated on her in just the worst way possible, for very shallow reasons. I traveled a lot for work, and my relationship also ended due to us just outgrowing each other. About a year after she moved away, I got a short gig working in the country she was living in. She came to meet me at the airport, super excited to show me all around her city. We had an amazing day together and caught up like no time had passed since the last time we saw each other. We went out for a lovely meal. She insisted on paying. I walked her home afterward, and then I kissed her goodnight in the snow. 10 years later, we are still together. For the sake of my sanity, I'm just going to tell myself you had a bad haircut on your first date. Story 3. Her phone rang. She answered it. I expected it to be a friend calling to see if she wanted to be saved. She got concerned and hung up and said, "That was my ex. He got arrested. Can you bring me to the police station?" So I did. I even helped them fill out some paperwork so he could get released. I took them to his car and she looked at me. I laughed and said, "The date was over hours ago. Go." Then she got in his car and they drove away. This sounds like it was a first date, in which case I can't really blame you. At some point these two became just a couple of strangers that you felt bad for and wanted to help. Story 4. We had a fun night having a personal date, and then we pulled up to his house for his birthday party, where I'm about to meet his family for the first time. He turned to me and said, "Oh, by the way, my parents don't like Mexicans. I am Mexican." I was like, "What do you want me to do with that information?" He said, "Just be yourself." I mean, yeah, I can't be anyone else. It was wild. They were polite, but very patronizing. Needless to say, that ended quickly. I'm Mexican too. In a similar case, when I flew in to visit a girl I met online, I found out her dad was racist. He just avoided me and stayed out of the house 99% of the time. And then I was dragged to a family dinner at her grandmother's house, and she was an even bigger racist. Fun times. They were very patronizing as well. I saw my way out and stayed in the car that afternoon. I mean, this is crazy. The least they could do is tell you before you ever got to meet their parents. The only reasonable thing to do is to tell you and to say if you ever wanted to meet them you can, but you don't have to. Nobody is entitled to your time and effort. It's upsetting that these people felt okay forcing someone into a situation they would have otherwise never put themselves in. Story 5. I was in recovery from my eating disorder. The guy came over to watch a movie and eat pizza. This was our second or third date. We were talking about fitness when he grabbed my bare thigh and jiggled it, asking, "How could you say you work out?" He thought it was funny. Other highlights include him drinking too much to drive home after assuming this was a hookup, and then calling me a Puritan for making him sleep on my floor. He also wanted me to pay for the $300 parking ticket he received. He parked in a private parking zone without a permit in Los Angeles. I tried to warn him they hand out tickets all the time, but he swore it would be fine. We did not see each other again. Story 6. It was my first date from a dating app. I could tell he was maybe a touch too desperate based on the texts we exchanged. However, he was also whip smart and was almost finished with grad school, so I still agreed to go out. We didn't have a spark, which I noticed immediately. On the other hand, he was oblivious to it. No big deal. Then he suggests a walk after dinner. I agree like an idiot. On that walk, he proceeded to tell me that his ex-girlfriend cheated on him, that he thinks he'll always love her, even though she cheated on him with his best friend, and she gave him an STD. And the worst thing I ever heard on a date was, but don't worry, it's one of the ones that clears up on its own. Nope, I'm married now, so all is well. However, after that date, I still had a class in the same building as his grad school. We had so many awkward run-ins. I swear the only way to be safe these days is to request medical documents from prospective partners. Story 7. This girl asked me out. I wasn't even too interested in her, but since it's rare for a girl to ask a guy out, I figured I'd give her a chance and go on a date with her. We made plans to eat at a specific restaurant at 7 p.m. I got there on time and texted her to let her know I'm there. Around 20 minutes later, she texted me back, apologizing and saying that she fell asleep but she's on her way and she'll be there in 20 minutes. I waited around 20 minutes, went to a random Petco nearby to look at the animals and kill time. She hadn't texted me, so I waited around 20 more minutes. At that point, I decided to text her to see how she's doing, but the message didn't go through, and I found out she blocked me. If you aren't interested, why are you pretending to be? Just a ghost when I try to make plans. We haven't even talked enough for you to encounter a deal breaker. I'd be tempted to catfish her with a photo of a gorgeous guy and then never show up to the date. Story 8. Quoting here, I can tell you are an only child because you have major personality flaws. I have a lot of siblings and they all make remarks about my son being an only child and how weird that's going to make him. I'm a single mom. How do you suppose I'm going to have another child when I don't have support? It's insulting to me and my child. There isn't anything wrong with having only one child. I'm sure my siblings agree that we are all messed up from being neglected and not getting our emotional needs met when we were kids. As a parent, I can't imagine attempting to connect to 11 kids. Obviously, my parents couldn't either. I feel attacked. I may be an introvert, but I don't see any harm in that. We're not all self-centered, and we can learn how to share. Nobody in my life now was around me during my childhood. I don't have anyone to share those memories with. Some people think we're spoiled, maybe so to a degree because less children equals more money. However, both of my parents remarried. It wasn't 2 parents parenting 5, it was 4 parents parenting just me. Let me tell you how much fun that was. When people in family die, guess who gets to handle all that basically all alone? It's not as amazing as the sibling havers would lead you to believe. I have 9 siblings, I'm the 9th of 10 kids. When I was pregnant, I asked my mother if she took DES when she was pregnant with me because birth defects can go past the next generation. She said, why would I do that? I reminded her she miscarried right before getting pregnant with me, and that was her second miscarriage, and she said, I already had 8 kids, why would I care if I miscarried? Yikes. This story has made me realize a lot about my only siblings. I can't imagine finding out my mother wouldn't have cared if I was born. That's at least one thing only children have going for them. I think it's so unfair to judge only children because there are endless reasons why someone might not have siblings. Story 9. She ordered a really expensive meal and drink after I had offered to buy her dinner. The plate was $50, the drink was $25. I will admit I went with it until she said, I want to date someone like you, but not you. I was going to tell you earlier, but I was hungry. Then she went and made plans with another dude for after our meal. I went to the bathroom and then snuck out when our food was brought. I don't know how she paid for that because I ordered something equally as expensive. I blocked her as I left. Story 10. He told me, I can't commit to you because you're not a Christian, but we can still do it. This sounds like my ex-boyfriend. We were on and off for 5 years. Each time he broke up with me, 3 times in total. It was due to our religious differences. He was raised Southern Baptist, and I was a non-practicing Catholic. After the 3rd breakup, he started dating someone else that also posted random Bible verses on their Facebook page. 2 times while they were dating, he called me up and I stupidly agreed to go out with him. Of course, we ended up sleeping together both times. I know, but I really had it bad for him and wasn't taking the final breakup well. After my rationality kicked in, I realized that he just wanted to hook up with me because his girlfriend thought he was a good Christian boy, but he knew he could get me back in bed with him. They ended up getting married. It took me a couple of years to really truly get over him, but I eventually did. 5 years after they got married, she died. When I found out, the more mature side of me felt sorry for him. I texted my condolences, trying to be the bigger person, and about 2 weeks after she had passed, he asked me to dinner, and for some reason I agreed. On the way back from dinner, he reached over to hold my hand. I was completely freaked out over how disturbed this man was. I'm not interested in being anyone's backup plan, so I've cut off all communication. Story 11. He got angry when I said I didn't want to go further than kissing and denied him putting his hand under my shirt. His argument was, I have a relationship with your whole body, not just your head. Yikes. I'm pretty sure my last relationship ended for similar reasons, but my ex was more civil about it and said he wasn't happy. Not saying it didn't suck because it sure did, but I just don't get why he thought he could try to change or cross my boundaries and I would be fine with it. Story 12. He said to me, I was reading about plus-size models today. What do you think about plus-size models considering you're a bigger girl? I'm 5'4" and 125 pounds. He was not being sarcastic. He had the most warped sense of body image I've ever encountered. Joke's on him though, because his head was shaped like a light bulb. It was very jarring. I was literally sitting there wearing kid-sized jeans from Target. I laughed initially when he said it because I was sure he was kidding. Then I realized he was dead serious. I should really tell you how the rest of the date went. After asking me weird questions about plus-size models, he basically ignored me and watched the TV at the bar over the top of my head. I decided to get out of there, and he left as well. We walked out of the bar, and he asked where I parked. I pointed down the street, and he said, "Cool, me too. You can see my sweet ride." We got up near his car, and no joke, the man had a custom airbrushed PT Cruiser. He was so proud of this car and was telling me all about it, and I was trying to be generally polite and act interested. At this point, he threw me up against the side of the car and tried to slide his tongue down my throat. I got out of there and hustled to my own car. I never reached out to him again, obviously, but he really thought we should go on a second date and kept messaging me. Then, 5 years later, I got back on the same dating site after our relationship ended, and Lightbulb Head messages me, how about that second date? Must have really been into bigger girls like me. Hey you! Yeah, you! If you've made it this far, please like and subscribe. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video, and have a wonderful day. Story 13. Not exactly a date, but at a dance when I was a teenager, I sat down for a breather after I'd been dancing for a long time. Right then, a slow song started and a couple girls come up. One of them introduced me to her friend and asked me to dance with her because nobody had asked her to dance yet. I felt really bad for her and said, heck yeah, everybody deserves to dance. She spent the whole time talking about how I'm such a piece of garbage for sitting down when there are girls like her who haven't been asked to dance. I kept trying to change the subject. She just ignored me and kept trash-talking me, so I walked away mid-dance. That was crappy of her. I think you're sweet for offering. Story 14. After spending the night doing all sorts of things, she invited me up to her apartment and said, we just have to be careful not to wake my boyfriend. She wasn't talking about messing around. I did call her on it. We'd been out on several dates, and she had never mentioned him. She said, oh, I thought you knew. Oh man, this brought up a memory. I was incredibly naive in my early 20s and made plans to go see a movie with a friend at my college. I had never really had friends before since I was an incredibly awkward teen, and male attention was completely foreign to me. So if guys were ever flirting, I automatically defaulted to them being friendly. While we were in the theater waiting for the movie to start, I was overwhelmed by the fact that I was out at a movie with someone who wasn't family, and they actually wanted to be there. I told him, I'm so happy we're seeing this movie, you're such a good friend. I noticed his face drop, and he sort of went silent. For a long time, I was confused as to why he looked sad when I had called him a good friend. It wasn't until years later that I realized he had thought we were on a date, and I was way too dense to see it. Story 15. She called me the F word because I declined to sleep with her on the first date. I don't sleep with people that fast. It's not for me. All power to you if that's something you enjoy, but don't pressure someone into it by questioning their sexual orientation. I also don't find it particularly attractive to be calling people slurs because you didn't get your way. I had that happen with a classmate when I went back to college. She was very attractive, but I was trying to get away from the friends with benefits thing. We were at the bar and she said everyone here, including the girls, would sleep with me. All the dudes and a couple of the girls agreed. She then points at me and says, he would sleep with me too, wouldn't you? I just said, nope. The shock on her face was priceless. That's when she whipped out the F word. I said I wasn't gay, just not interested. Like if you want to be with me, then maybe trying to shame me isn't a smart idea. If she had just asked me why in a polite manner, I would have told her with 100% honesty that I only want to sleep with someone I'm in love with. Story 16. It was all going really well until she saw a group of people with various disabilities. When we were going for a walk and proceeded to tell me how she had nothing against the disabled, they made her physically ill because of how messed up they are, and she wished there were limits on how much they could be out in public. I told her, as a person with an invisible disability of my own, that she made my skin crawl and she should be limited on how much she can be in public. There was obviously no second date. Story 17. Our first date, I ordered a mocktail and he said, "I'm not going to pay for your drinks unless there's alcohol in them." This reminds me of the time I was on a date I wasn't aware was a date. My friend said he had a crush on another person who was going to this concert and just wanted me to come. There was a bar at the concert and my friend kept buying me drinks, I guess as an attempt to get me drunk enough to do something to me. I wouldn't even be finished with my drink and he would put another drink in my hand. I have a crazy high tolerance, so I didn't even get drunk, but I realized what was going on later when he angrily texted me that he spent all his savings on me, like $130. I was like, "Bro, I didn't ask you to buy me drink after drink. Sorry you're upset that I didn't get inebriated enough to go with whatever you wanted to do." How do people like that even justify their own actions to themselves? By needing someone to be drunk, you're just admitting that you know they wouldn't do this sober. Crazy. Story 18. He asked me, "Are you calling the cops on me because I drugged you?" Before I started to feel fuzzy or anything, I asked if he could pass me my phone. I just wanted to check the notifications, and that's when he asked if I was calling the cops. Before that, I had zero suspicion of being drugged. I awkwardly laughed it off because I didn't know how to respond. I hadn't gotten any weird vibes from him prior to that, so I was confused. This was also the day before my 18th birthday, so I was very naive about these things happening. After that, I just remember vague pieces from the rest of the night here and there. I did drive myself home, but I have no memory of doing so. I didn't tell anyone for about a month because I was extremely ashamed of what happened. My sister had reported her assault a few years before this and the police blamed her, so I didn't call the cops because I didn't feel safe enough to. I'm okay now. I have a very loving support system that has helped me get out of the worst parts of it. If you work in the legal system and you have ever blamed the victim for being drugged by their date, shame on you. Story 19. On a date with my wife 12 years in, she says, "I don't think I love you anymore," out of the blue. The same thing happened to me. While getting dressed to go celebrate his birthday with friends, he says, "I don't love you anymore." We were married for 10 years at that point. I had no idea he felt that way. I tried to save our marriage, but he wouldn't try. I still miss him. It was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. It destroyed my self-esteem and confidence. I started therapy and I'm healing. I have been working with my therapist to slowly remove the rose-tinted glasses. I started to realize the things I gave up on because I thought that was just what you did in a marriage. There are still difficult days, like his birthday or our wedding anniversary, but I am healing. I know I was a good and loyal wife to him. I'm hoping one day to find someone who can appreciate my love. Story 20. It wasn't what was said, but what wasn't said, because her face was buried in her phone screen the whole evening. She was shocked when I told her that we would not be going out again. I had a date like this once. This guy barely listened to a word I said and was far more interested in scrolling through Instagram and discussing football with his friends. I told him I was going to the bathroom and then left and messaged him saying I wasn't going to waste my time. I figured this was the only way to get through to him, and if I had said it to his face, it would have gone in one ear and out the other. I learned that lesson very early on. The first real date I went on, the summer after high school, my date was on her phone for probably a good 30% of a 2-hour date. I went out with her 2 more times and it was the same story. After that, I pretty much had a firm policy that if my date spends a significant amount of time on her phone, I move on. It's also why I started doing coffee for first dates. If you can't hold a conversation with your date for an hour, it's not going to work out. Story 21. Tried to get me to join a multi-level marketing scheme. Turns out he was targeting single moms through Match.com. When I ghosted, he acted surprised. On my voicemail, of course, because I ghosted him. This happened to me too. We'd gone on a couple brief dates and got along well, or so I thought at the time. Then she invited me to what she called this really cool place up in LA. I drove there with her from San Diego, got to a hotel conference room in the middle of nowhere and was approached and pressured by all sorts of odd folks. I ended up leaving the conference only to wait in the parking lot for her to eventually come out afterwards. Super awkward ride home. Never spoke to her again. Story 22. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You know that cancer is a hoax perpetrated by Big Pharma and the government preying on the uneducated, right? As I'm a survivor whose life was derailed by cancer, that was the first and only time in my life I ghosted someone in a restaurant. I'm glad he showed me who he was so very early on. I sometimes wonder where he was hoping that comment would land. Even if I bought into his conspiracy theory, the guy literally called me uneducated to my face like he felt sorry for me, building a strong foundation for a relationship right there. I had a guy go on and on about how he didn't believe in Western medicine, or pain relief for childbirth, or giving his dog preventative meds. I was in medical school at the time, which he knew. Story 23. I told him I would like us to just pay for ourselves, so I don't feel uncomfortable ordering what I want. He said, fine. He disliked every option we had to eat out except the one place I don't like. Whatever, I'll deal with it. When we got there, he ordered seafood and several cups of wine. The check comes and eventually he stares at it and says, so you said you're paying? I didn't bring my wallet. I was instantly mad. I parked my car at his house and we drove together to the restaurant, so he had to drive me back. On the way, he stopped at an Arby's and asked if I wanted anything. I said no, then he proceeded to bust out his wallet and pay for his meal. I was heated. Then he blew up my phone when I didn't want to go on another date, and he said, well, it's your loss. He was something else. He randomly hit me up 7 years ago asking how life treated me. My kid was only a month old, so I was up at odd hours and didn't see the message until 4 a.m. on a Saturday, so I responded. He messaged me back to never ever disturb his sleep again by messaging him at 4 a.m., and that Saturdays are his special sleep-in days. You should have waited a week and messaged him back the following Saturday at 4 a.m. Story 24. When he said, I don't think I can get it up, but would you mind coming home with me anyway? Decades ago, a guy showed up for our date with a black eye and some bruises. He was usually pretty hot, but for obvious reasons, he was very much not hot that night. Turned out he'd taken a bad tackle in rugby that afternoon. I offered to rain check our date, but he said no. Anyway, by mid-meal, he was slurring his speech and seemed like he was going to fall asleep. The entire restaurant was looking at him. I asked repeatedly if he'd like to leave, and he kept shaking it off and trying to rally for a little bit longer. He kept starting random new conversational threads with me, like he couldn't follow the conversation we were already having. His laughs were delayed, even if he made the joke. Anyway, he asked me to take his wallet and pay for the bill, so I did. And when I gave his wallet back, he hit me with that stellar line. I took him home with me because I thought he'd been pre-gaming and was too drunk to drive himself. Fortunately, my roommate was home, and she said he probably had a concussion, and I had to wake him every 20 minutes for water and check his speech. This guy seemed like he probably would have been very genuine and probably charming if he didn't have a concussion. Thanks for watching until the end. Please leave your story in the comments. I would also love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. For more videos like this one, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.